Hello everybody, my name is Thomas, and I'm coming at you guys with a raid guide to the brand new raid in Destiny 2, Root of Nightmares. Now I'm going to jump straight into this raid guide with the first encounter, which is called Cataclysm, and for this encounter, everything is simple. Your team is going to designate one or two people to running around the room, while everyone else is just clearing anything that spawns. Now, this one or two people, we're going to call them runners, because as you're about to see in the background gameplay, their job is to shoot the white orb with the aura around it and take the buff that they get, which is called Field of Light, to the next node in the rotation, which is designated from a line going from node 1 to 2 and a line going from 2 to 1. Now, as you progress through the encounter, it's going to change, going from 2 to 3 and 3 to 2, so on and so forth. Each set of nodes, as you progress through the encounter, adds one node that you need to activate. So you're going to start with 4 nodes, go to 5, then 6, then 7. Now, for everyone else on the fire team, though, what you're going to be doing is you're just going to be clearing everything that spawns. Anything from a Scion to a barrier champion. And this is important because it's going to allow your runners to flex through the room without any problems whatsoever. As you'll see in the background gameplay, though, you're going to have to pause every here and there from killing everything because there are going to be some Scions that spawn with a bubble shield. Now, these Scions are super important because what they do is they spawn a barrier champion on one side and a tormentor called a Cavum of Nezarec on the other side. The super important thing about this mechanic is the Cavum of Nezarec, because as you can see on my screen, the sweeping terror debuff right above my face says 42 seconds or something, maybe 30 at some point. And this is the wipe mechanic countdown. This is saying you have 30 seconds until your team gets wiped. So, being able to extend that timer is very useful, especially for the person who's running and trying to give you a little bit of time without that timer. So, this is important because your runner may not always need that extension, as you'll probably find out. But what you can do is you can save this Cavum of Nezarec for the next rotation of the Sweeping Terror debuff when it starts, and if you kill him quickly enough, you can get 50 seconds to a minute of time on your timer, and you can have a lot of time to breathe at the start. Get rid of everything, wait for that next wave of Scions to spawn, and then take everything super slowly and get through the encounter very easily. Some things to note about this, it can be a little dangerous. The Tormentors do hit really hard, and if you break their shoulders, they can be a really big nuisance running around the map, chasing any member of the fire team for an extended period of time, grabbing them, suppressing them, any of the above. It's just annoying. So I'd like to say try and avoid that as much as possible, but it is super useful to do. Me and my team did it a bunch. It's just a great thing to be able to take a minute and breathe and say, okay, now we have time to do this. Here we go. And once you have that time, it's almost like the encounter becomes a million times easier. Giving yourself that little buffer allows you to kind of slow down, look at what's where, find maybe a Scion that you missed in this rotation, and get that next Tormentor up as soon as possible so you can have time to do damage to him. But that's all there really is to the first encounter, is killing those Tormentors and running that buff from node to node. So, now, with that being said, we're going to move on to the second encounter, which is called Scission. One thing I would like to note in the jumping puzzle between encounters, Cataclysm and Scission, there is a collectible and a secret chest that are up for grabs. The gameplay in the background will show you exactly where they are, so I'm just going to let the gameplay guide you to each item. One little extra tidbit of information. My fire team dealt with it before I got there this time, but there is a tormentor that needs to be dealt with in order to unlock the door to the secret chest. And as far as I know, this is the same type of tormentor that was featured in the first encounter. Nothing super special, just something that you're going to see and go, oh, this is here. And then you'll deal with it, and then the doors will open, and then that's that. But with all of this being said, that's all there is to in between encounters. Let's move on to encounter number 2, Scission. Alright, with that jumping puzzle having been completed, we now arrive at encounter number 2, Scission. This encounter is very similar to the first encounter in respect that there are still going to be 2 runners taking aura and delivering it to nodes throughout the room. This encounter is different because there is a new aura type that has been added that lights up an area orange just as the light aura lights up an area white. Now, shooting the node that has this aura around it, the orange aura, will allow you to get a buff called Flux of Darkness. What Flux of Darkness does is, just like Field of Light, it allows you to activate darkness nodes that are in the room. So, now that we know that you can activate darkness nodes that are throughout the room, you and the other runner on your team, or the 2 runners on your team, are going to be carrying Field of Light and Flux of Darkness to 5 different nodes on each floor of this encounter. So, what you want to know about these nodes is that the first node for each respective buff is on the opposite side of the arena. So, if you start on the light side of the arena, your next node is going to be on the darkness side of the arena. And if you start on the darkness side of the arena, your next node is going to be on the light side of the arena. With that knowledge, one thing me and my fire team did was, instead of each runner only going back to grab their respective buff, so Darkness Runner is reserved specifically for Darkness buff, and Light Runner is reserved specifically for Light buff, what we did was, when the runners would switch sides, they would take over for the other runner on that side. Basically, the Light Runner, when they activated node number 2, would then switch to Darkness and then go activate nodes number 3 and 4, because 4 you have to switch sides anyways, so it keeps your team moving efficiently if you keep one person on each side of the room until they have to switch sides. Now, with this knowledge, each runner is going to respectively go 1, 2 for theirs, then 3, 4 for the opposite, and 5, 6 for theirs again. So, the light runner will get 1 and 2 for light. 1 is already activated, it is the one with the aura around it. 2 is the second node you activate in the room on the opposite side of the arena. And then the light runner would stay on the darkness side of the arena, go activate darkness node number 3. Then when they go back for the Flux of Darkness buff, they switch sides and go activate darkness node number 4. Now, the Darkness Runner does the same thing, but just for light. So they go activate darkness node number 2, then grab Field of Light, go activate light node number 3, and then they go back, get Field of Light again, and go activate light node number 4. This is the most efficient way I have seen this encounter be done yet. I'm sure a new way will come that will keep it just as efficient or maybe even more efficient than this, but this is the most efficient way I have seen it done. Now, for the other 4 people on your fire team, what they are going to be doing is just clearing the arena of enemies to make sure that these runners that you have on your team can get through the arena as efficiently as possible without having a hiccup or a death somewhere in the middle. The reason this is important is because there are ads that spawn everywhere in this room. I mean, once you are at node number 3, this room is cluttered. And I mean filled to the brim with Scions, Legionaries, Gladiators, anything you can think of, it is there. Now, what you will notice with your team is that each time one of your runners shoots a node with the aura around it, a certain amount of enemies spawn. This is important because one of those enemies out of the bunch of them is going to be an immune Centurion. And the only way you can damage this immune Centurion is by having the Field of Light or Flux of Darkness buff respectively. So, what your team is going to want to do is make sure that every time one of your runners goes to get a Field of Light or Flux of Darkness buff, you have someone that is clearing enemies moving back with them to go get this buff, allowing your team to have a constant rotation of Field of Light or Flux of Darkness on the enemy killing side as well, to make sure that you guys don't miss anything or get 4 or 5 immune enemies up at once and then are like, oh my god, what is going on? So, with all of this knowledge in hand, it sounds like all of the jobs in this encounter are pretty simple, which, for the most part, they are. One thing you will notice as the encounter progresses, though, is as your fire team progresses to node number 5 on each floor, a barrier champion will spawn. Knocking this barrier champion down as fast as possible is as important as I cannot stress this enough, because they hit very hard. Even if this is a 1770 level activity, they know they're a champion and they know that they can do a lot of damage really fast. So they are going to put pressure on you. But besides the champions and the immune enemies, once you and your team have activated node number 6 for each set on each floor, you're going to see a little thing down above your super bar where your emotes pop up that says your pathway up is being blocked by a group of interlopers, or something along those lines. Now, these interlopers are going to be a bunch of Cabal that are immune to any damage that isn't founded or not substituted, that's not the right word, supported by the Field of Light or Flux of Darkness buff. Now, this is important because once you activate all 6 nodes, you can activate these buffs as fast as you want to without any chill. Throughout the normal encounter, though, what might happen is your light runner might get a little bit ahead of your darkness runner, and they might need to chat a little bit and go, hey, I just activated my light node. Are you almost at your darkness node? Because I'm ready to pick up this buff. And then the darkness runner will go, oh, yeah, I'm right here. You can grab darkness buff now. And then that's how they know that they're in the clear and they're no longer super staggered and they're keeping pace with each other. Keeping pace with each other is important because if, let's say, your light runner is in front of your darkness runner and he goes to activate, or they go to activate the light or the darkness buff before the darkness runner has deposited their buff at the node, the darkness runner will then lose their buff. So, keeping communication between your runners is key, because if the runner doesn't get to activate their node, then your entire order is staggered by one node. And you're a little bit behind on one side than the other, and it's just a little bit awkward. But, so, with that knowledge in hand, at the end when the interlopers pop up, you can shoot this node with the aura around it as many times as you'd like and get the buff as many times in a row as you'd like to, because it's not that important anymore if you shoot it after someone else has shot it, because they're never going to go away anymore. They've all been activated. You are safe. There's no more imminent expulsion timer, meaning that your team is not in danger of getting wiped out of the arena. There is nothing pressuring you guys to get up to the next floor as fast as possible. There is only that group of immune enemies in your way in between you and the next floor of this encounter. But once you and your fire team pick up the buff on your respective sides and get rid of these immune enemies, you will see a new chat pop up above your super and where your emotes pop up that says energy travels upwards beckoning you, or something like that. I'm pretty sure that's what it says. But regardless, this is going to mean that the man cannons at the end of the hall have been activated, and that your team is ready to advance to the next floor of this encounter. There are 3 floors to this encounter that total up to 3 different groups of interlopers, 15 nodes per runner, so 30 nodes total, and that's about it. There's nothing else to this encounter besides switching sides, activating your nodes, and making sure that everything is going down as fast and efficiently as possible to make sure that your runners have the space that they need. But with that being said, there is one more puzzle that comes after this encounter between you and the next encounter, so I will meet you when you complete this encounter. Now that you and your fire team have completed encounter number 2 and enter the big flower at the front of the room. One thing you will see is a darkness node on the right side of the room and a light node on the left side of the room. Your job with these is to do the exact same thing you've been doing throughout the rest of the raid. Just string them to the other nodes hidden around the room, and then bring them back to the middle, where you will see the light node connects to the top of that big white platform in the middle, and the darkness node connects to the bottom of that platform in the middle. But once you connect both of these sets of nodes to the bottom of the platform in the middle, as you see in the background gameplay, what will happen is the front of the flower will open up, and your team will be able to progress to the jumping puzzle that comes after this flower. Now, one warning, this jumping puzzle is kind of a doozy, so get ready. Alright, now that you've made your way down the little pathway at the end of the flower puzzle, you have come to the Cataclysm jumping puzzle. Now, this one is a little bit of a doozy, as I mentioned earlier, only because there is a white mechanic that has been implemented in this jumping puzzle, which makes it kind of a pain to get through sometimes. So, what you're going to want to do to prevent your team from dying to this white mechanic as much as possible is go to a light node, shoot the light node to get Field of Light as you see in the background gameplay. And then you are going to want to run to a darkness node and shoot that because it gives you a buff called Darkness's Refuge. This allows you to resist the white mechanic that has been implemented in this encounter, or jumping puzzle, and survive a little bit longer, make your way a little bit deeper, because this wipe mechanic is actually implemented fairly quickly, and it can become a little bit disorienting if you and your team aren't keeping up with it and you end up getting lost because someone died a little bit too much and they're a little bit too far behind and now you have to go back and get them or something like that. So you're going to want to make sure that you and your team are stacked up as much as possible together, not like me and my team are doing in the background gameplay. We ended up having a very hard time getting through this puzzle. It took us about 15 minutes-ish. So you're going to want to stay in a group anywhere 4 to 6 of you, just so you can have a decent-sized group that can make it through all together, and then you're not waiting for, let's say, like 3 or 4 stragglers that are all on their own trying to make their way through the jumping puzzle. Because it can be a little bit annoying if you have to sit there and wait for someone and then you have to go back and get them and then you end up dying a couple times on your way back just to show them how to get to where everyone else is. So you're going to want to make sure that you and your team are bunched up as much as possible, because the other thing that is applied to this is only one member of the team needs to get Field of Light for the entire rest of the team to get Darkness's Refuge. That means that as you guys are progressing through the puzzle, only one person needs to break off from the group really quick to go get Field of Light, and then they can meet everyone else at the next Darkness node and get Darkness's Refuge with everyone. And the good thing about this is that you can rotate the Field of Light runner as you make your way through the puzzle, so it's not the same person every time. This allows your team to move together as a group and understand exactly how you need to move through this jumping puzzle together, because, as I said, it can be very confusing if you all end up dying 4 or 5 times. Me and my team ended up getting lost, and some of these guys are experienced raiders with over 200 clears. So just keep an eye out for the white mechanic, keep an eye on your Darkness's Refuge, and you'll be able to get through this jumping puzzle no problem. Alright, once you and your fire team have made it through that last jumping puzzle, you will have made it to encounter number 3, Macrocosm, which features the first boss of this raid, Zoark, Explicator of Planets. As you can probably tell from the name of the boss and the layout of the room, the planets that are just kind of hanging out in the sky above you and your fire team are going to play kind of an influential role on this encounter. With that being said, the first thing you'll notice that up in front, near where the boss is standing before the encounter starts, you'll see a light planet on the left side of the room and a dark planet on the right side of the room. Using these 2 planets as guidelines, you and your team's job during this encounter is going to be to get all of the light planets on one side of the room and all of the darkness planets on the opposite side of the room. Now, I can probably see you thinking to yourself, Tom, all of the planets look the same, and none of them are light and none of them are dark. How do we know that? And I got you. Just give me a second, we'll get there. So, before we get there though, we're going to talk about how you're going to split up your team. You're going to split up your team into 3 groups of 2 here. 2 people are going to go to the left, 2 people are going to go to the right, and 2 people are going to stay in the middle. For the 2 people that are staying in the middle, what you're going to do is you're going to control the pace of this encounter. Basically, anything that comes your way that spawns in the middle has to go down. And at some point, you'll notice these yellow bar phalanxes that spawn. Try and take those out as fast as possible. They don't really have any super large influence on the encounter, but they can be annoying. So taking them out as quickly as possible is nice, but not needed. Next thing you'll notice that spawns is up where the boss is standing at the start of the encounter on that elevated platform that's higher than the rest of the middle platform. There's going to be 2 yellow bar centurions that spawn. Killing these guys is going to spawn mini boss class Colossus on each of the outside triangular plates that are called terrestrial lieutenants. It's the responsibility of the 4 players that are positioned on these outside plates to take care of their respective terrestrial lieutenant. Each player on a plate should kill their own, not someone else's, preferably. But I guess it's okay if you kill someone else's. I haven't tried that out, so go for it. But really, with that being said, that's all there really is to being part of the 2-man team that's in the middle, is controlling what's going where, taking care of everything, making sure that you're getting those phalanx and those centurions down in time for the rest of your team to do what they need to do. Now, moving on to the 4 people, outside of the arena on the triangular platforms. So those triangular platforms, there's one in the bottom left, one in the bottom right. Those are going to be the closest to you when you first walk in the room. And then there's one in the front right and one in the front left. Those are going to be the farthest away from you when you enter the room. And one thing you'll notice floating above these plates is that there's 3 planets. One on the inside of the room, one kind of near that back walkway where there's 2 spawn doors for the scions that spawn throughout the encounter, and then one kind of also in the middle of the room but more on the front side. These all have numbers. So the one closest to you when you first walk in the room, that's going to be 1, the one on the inside. And then the one near the back platform where the scions spawn, that's number 2. And then the one up on the front of the plate, kind of close to the middle still, but on the frontmost part of the room, that's number 3. And then the front plate follows the same naming convention, but with 4, 5, and 6. So 4 is closest to you when you walk in, 5's near that back walkway near the scion doors, and 6 is at the frontmost part of the room near the exit of the encounter. But now that you know how the plates are numbered, you really don't have anything to do up until your terrestrial lieutenant spawns. Once your terrestrial lieutenant spawns, it's your job to take care of him as quickly as possible, because once you kill the terrestrial lieutenant, you will get a buff that is called Planetary Insight. What this allows you to do is, if you look up above you, once you have Planetary Insight, you'll notice that the planets above your plate have changed. They have become either a light planet or a darkness planet. If you're on the light side of the room, you're going to have 2 light planets and a darkness planet. If you are on the darkness side of the room, you're going to have the opposite. So you're going to have 2 darkness planets and 1 light planet. What your job with Planetary Insight is going to be to do is pick out the odd man out, so your darkness or your light planet, depending on which side of the room you're on, and align that planet. What that means is, what you'll notice is that underneath all of these planets on the corner of the plate, there is a little white ball that spawns. If you walk up to that, you're going to get an interact prompt that says Align Planet. By interacting with this and aligning your planet, you have now taken this planet on yourself, and you are going to move it to somewhere else. Now, when I say move it, ideally you're going to have a buddy on the other side of the arena, so the front plates would be buddied up, so front right and front left would be buddied up, and then the back plates would be buddied up, so back left and back right would be buddied up. And so what's going to happen is, let's say we're on the front platforms, right? I'm on front left and you're on front right. We both get our terrestrial lieutenants down, we get Planetary Insight, we can see the changes, and I say, okay, mine is 4. You'd say, okay, mine is 6. And then what we would do is we would trek across the arena to the other person's plate, so I would go to your plate and you would go to my plate, and then you would align with my 4 node, and I would align with your 6 node. What this does is it takes the 2 planets on those nodes, 4 and 6, which are the 2 out-of-place planets, and moves them to their proper place. So I would be taking my darkness planet and moving it to your 6 node, and you would be taking your light planet and moving it to my 4 node, therefore making 3 light planets above my plate and 3 darkness planets above your plate. Once that is done and the planets have shifted their spots, In order to have done this correctly, you will see a big beam shoot up out of the middle of your plate and a chat right above your super that says the index planets reveal themselves. If you have done this successfully, that means that you are ready to start a damage phase. If you messed up, don't worry, it's not that big of a deal. Another round of Centurions will spawn, which will spawn again another round of Terrestrial Lieutenants. Getting them down gets you Planetary Insight, and then you just repeat the process from there. Use that Planetary Shift buff, I don't know if I mentioned that earlier, to move the planets from node to node. And then once that's done, you get your beams, and then you're ready. Once you are ready to move on to damage phase, that's what you get when you get the index planets reveal themselves. You get the chance to do damage. You get another wave of Centurions. The second wave of Centurions is always a must. Sometimes you'll face 3 if you mess it up, but it's not that big of a deal if you face 3. But killing these Centurions once again spawns a Terrestrial Lieutenant. Getting this Terrestrial Lieutenant down, just like earlier in the encounter, also gets you Planetary Insight. With this Planetary Insight, if you look above your plate, you should have either 3 darkness planets or 3 light planets, depending on whichever side you're on. But that's not important. If you shift your gaze to the middle of the arena, where the boss is kind of roaming around bullying your 2 fire team members, you will notice that there are 3 planets above the middle, and 2 of them are going to be one polarity, let's just say for this example light, and 1 of them is going to be an odd man out polarity, darkness in this example. If we have light, light, dark, reading from left to right, what your fire team is going to want to do is, alright, say alright, the dark has 1 planet that needs to be aligned. So darkness side goes first, therefore allowing your team to get that 1 planet that needs to be done out of the way first. Then, what your team can do is you can take any light planet and align it with any plate. Same applies for the darkness planet. Any darkness planet can go to the plate as long as it is a planet with the darkness aura on it. Once that is done, and all 3 planets have been aligned in the middle, you will notice once your team gathers in the middle, the planets will shift towards the middle and float above their plates. And if you have done it right, the 3 planets that were already in the middle, waiting to be aligned with the 3 planets coming from the plates, will shift in and collide together. Once that happens, the boss is going to shift up, the plates are going to pop out an aura around them, and you are going to get ready for damage. Once the boss hops down off that elevated platform or starts getting down from it, you can start shooting him to do damage. Once you have reached this point, getting through the damage phase is just going to allow your fire team to start repeating the process and going again. Because once you do 1 damage phase, it's just a rinse and repeat from there. You know how to do the encounter, you can get through it. But that's all there really is to encounter number 3. With all of that being said, I'm going to wait for you and your fire team to get through this so we can do the puzzle right afterwards. A little bit of a note, something I forgot to mention in the original explanation, well not explanation, but a little bit of a helpful tip. Me and my fire team used Thunderlords to do damage to this boss alongside Well of Radiance and Strand Supers and a Tether. Tether stacks with Well of Radiance very well. Thunderlord is very good for continuous damage output. It's always been a very high damage output weapon, but now it's even better. And Strand Super just does a lot of damage right now. So hopefully with that, you and your fire team can make it through this encounter no problem. Once you have finished the 3rd encounter and you run forward to the doors at the front of the room, you're going to pass through them and you're going to come to another flower like you did at the end of the 2nd encounter. Same thing applies in here. What you're going to be doing is taking the light buff from the light node and stringing it across the room, darkness buff from the dark node and stringing it across the room, back to the middle of the room. Once your team successfully does this and strings both sets of nodes around the room, you are going to see a large pulse of darkness energy flow down the flower, and then the end of it's going to open up for you to enter the jumping puzzle right before Nezarec. Once you have completed the puzzle in the flower, and you have gone down the pathway at the end of the flower, you are going to find yourself jumping across some beans in this jumping puzzle. And as you get to this building, it is going to get a little bit disorienting, but there's nothing really to be worried about in this jumping puzzle. There is no white mechanic. There is nothing super serious going on. It's just you and your team trying to find your way to Nezarec, the final boss of this raid. There is a collectible in this jumping puzzle that me and my fire team ended up finding, so I'm going to let the background gameplay guide you to this collectible. But other than that, we weren't able to find anything else, so to my assumption, there really is nothing else. With that being said, I'm just going to go quiet, let the gameplay guide you, and I'll start explaining again at Nezarec. Through all the challenges, through all the trouble, you and your team have made it to the final encounter of this raid, Nezarec, the final god of pain. And as you can see from the background gameplay, there is the same running theme that has been there through most of this raid. There is the Field of Light buff and the Flux of Darkness buff. Different from the second encounter, you don't have to alternate sides that you're banking the buff on. So it's just Field of Light's on the left, Flux of Darkness is on the right, and that's it. You just run through your nodes, activate them, that's that. Now, the way your team's going to want to split for this encounter is you're going to have one runner or two runners for light, two runners or one runner for darkness, and then you're going to want to have two people in the middle that are designated to clearing ads and juggling Nezarec's hatred. Nezarec's hatred is a debuff that gets dispersed throughout the encounter, and what it does is it spawns the purple scion nades that shoot you up into the air. It spawns those under your feet constantly. And it's really annoying. Like, even when you're in the air, it's shooting you back up into the air. If you're not careful, it can kill you. But if you're juggling Nezarec's hatred and the two people in the middle are doing it well enough, you should have no problems activating your nodes. But let's say you and your partner or partners are going a little bit slow. Then what? Unfortunately, I don't have any footage of this at the moment, but what you can do is you can shoot Nezarec's shoulders to pop open his back. And when this happens, what's going to happen is his back is going to kind of like poof out a little fart of smoke that's going to be either light or orange. And what this means is you have to take either Field of Light or Flux of Darkness to the opposite node. So if it's orange, you take Field of Light to a darkness node and shoot the darkness node to get darkness as refuge. And if it's light, you take the darkness Flux of Darkness and bring it to a light node that does not have the aura around it, shoot the light node to get light's refuge. This allows you to resist the overwhelming energy white mechanic that Nezarec puts out during this encounter, and it gives you extra time to complete the nodes. Now, once you've completed all of the nodes on your side for either light or darkness, and you've done both of them in tandem, you're going to see all of those beams are going to shoot up into the sky. That's your team's signal to start doing damage. When that happens, you're all going to want to group up on any arbitrary plate throughout the encounter. It's not super specific where you are or where you have to be. And a plate where he can't hit you is preferable because there is a lot of stagger throughout this encounter, even just with the ads there. So you're going to want to try to avoid taking as much damage from Nezarec as possible. But once you've moved into a damage phase and you're all gathered on one plate, your team's job is just going to be to pour damage into Nezarec. There's nothing else you can really do. Just do damage, and then once your damage phase is over, you just repeat. So you're going to have your 1 or 2 runners for each side, go back, designate who's getting what, do their runs, and then the 2 people in the middle, if they're needed, they're going to shoot the shoulders, extend a little bit, give everyone that little bit of extra time that they need, and then you'll roll into another damage phase. Nezarec is by far one of the easier encounters in this raid. So there isn't too much to worry about. If your team can handle running and extending that shoulder mechanic, you will be fine. There's really nothing to worry about. Now, some little tips and tricks for damage. A Divinity, always nice. Nezarec doesn't have a super amount of health, but he does move around a lot, so getting those extra damage ticks in when possible is always helpful. Thunderlord, again, like the last encounter, very, very strong for Nezarec. Hits very hard. The new LMG buff this season has done wonders for Thunderlord, the opposite kind of for Xenophage, it seems. But if your team doesn't have a full 5-man of Thunderlord catalysts or whatever, what you can do is run rockets. Rockets are another really good alternative for Nezarec damage, and what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to pair 5 legendary rocket launchers with a Gallarhorn just to get that Pack Hunter perk on all 5 of those legendary rocket launchers. Now, if you can do the damage and you can rotate through, then you'll have no problem doing Nezarec. That's all there is to this raid. So I want to take a moment to thank everyone for clicking on this video. This is my first project of this type, so I'm sorry if it was a little rough on the edges or I spoke a little funky for a YouTube video like I was running the raid alongside you guys. I was just trying to find a rhythm of my own that I could use, but I really do appreciate everything and everyone. If you liked the video, please do leave a like and a comment in the bottom. Subscribe even, it would mean the world to me. Again, thank you everyone for watching. I will see you guys in the next video.